I never told my mother what was hidden in my father's warehouse. Not when she cried herself to sleep after his funeral. Not when she sold his suits to pay debts she didn't even know were real. And definitely not when she married Daniel, smiling, polished, and far too curious for his own good. The warehouse sat at the edge of town, rusted gates locked with chains so old they bled orange into the concrete. As a kid, I thought it was boring, just another building full of dusty boxes and broken machines. Dad never let Mom near it. He said it was business. She believed him because that's what wives do when they're tired of asking. But I knew better, because when I was 17, Dad took me there one night after a power outage. No lights, no workers, just the sound of our footsteps echoing like we were walking into a confession. "Remember this place," he told me, handing me a ring of keys heavier than my school bag. "If anything happens to me, you keep your mouth shut, especially to your mother." I laughed back then, uncomfortable. Why? He didn't answer. He just looked at me the way adults do when they already regret trusting you. After Dad died suddenly, heart attack, they said, Mom fell apart. I held her together with grocery receipts and lies. When she asked what Dad really did at the warehouse, I said, storage, old inventory, nothing important. That was my first betrayal. Daniel entered our lives a year later. He was kind in the way men are kind when they want control. Fixed the sink, paid for dinner, asked questions that sounded harmless until they stacked up. "So, what did your late husband really do? Why keep a warehouse if it's empty? Why does your daughter flinch whenever it's mentioned?" I watched him watch me. When Mom married him, he moved into our house like he'd always owned it. Within weeks, he started rearranging drawers, sorting papers, opening locked things with that casual confidence that said, "I deserve access." That's when I knew the warehouse secret wouldn't stay buried. One evening, I found Daniel in Dad's old study, holding a faded ledger I'd hidden behind a loose panel. My stomach dropped. "What's this?" he asked, smiling without warmth. "Old notes," I said, quickly. "Useless." He flipped a page. His smile twitched. The next morning, the warehouse keys were missing from my drawer. I followed him. He didn't know I'd memorized the route years ago, didn't know the back entrance where the cameras were dead, didn't know what waited behind the false wall Dad and I had built together in silence. I watched from my car as Daniel unlocked the main deed, confidence dripping from every step. He thought he'd found leverage, something to impress my mother with, maybe something to blackmail me. He went inside. The doors slammed shut behind him with a sound that felt final. I sat there shaking, remembering Dad's words, "Keep your mouth shut." Because the truth wasn't just dangerous, it was illegal, it was bloody, and once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Daniel had gone looking for answers, and I knew, deep down, he wouldn't come back the same. I didn't call the police. I didn't warn my mother. I just sat in my car counting the minutes, because I knew exactly how long it would take before Daniel realized why Dad never let anyone walk out of that warehouse alive. The warehouse stayed silent for too long. Daniel had been inside for nearly 20 minutes, and the lights still hadn't come on. Normally, the motion sensors would trigger a faint glow along the ceiling, but Dad had rewired that section years ago. He said machines didn't deserve to see everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Did Daniel go out with you? He didn't say goodbye." I didn't reply. Because I remembered the first time Dad showed me the false wall. It wasn't obvious, just a slightly different echo when you knocked, a line in the dust where no boxes were ever stacked. Dad had pressed his palm against it, then entered a code so old it felt like it belonged to another life. The wall slid open slowly, like it was reluctant to confess. Behind it wasn't money, not weapons, not drugs, at least not just that. It was records, shelves and shelves of files, ledgers, flash drives sealed in plastic, names written in red ink crossed out in black, photos clipped to folders, men in suits, men in handcuffs, men smiling beside people who later vanished. Dad wasn't a businessman. He was a cleaner. He erased evidence, destroyed trails, stored secrets powerful people paid to forget. The warehouse wasn't storage. It was a graveyard for truth, and Daniel had just walked straight into it. I finally heard a noise, a muffled thud, then another. I got out of the car. Inside, the warehouse smelled the same. Oil, dust, old paper. Daniel's footsteps echoed from deeper within, frantic now, no longer confident. I followed quietly, stopping just before the false wall. It was open. Daniel stood inside the hidden room, breathing hard, his phone flashlight shaking as it swept across the shelves. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Your father was insane." "No," I said from the doorway. He was careful. He spun around, eyes wild. "Do you know what this is? Do you know what this could be worth?" That was when I realized the worst part. Daniel didn't stumble onto the truth by accident. He'd been looking for something specific. "You already knew," I said slowly. "You married my mother to get close." His silence answered me. "They're still active," he said, lifting a folder. "Some of these people, this isn't old. This is current. If this gets out—" "They won't let it," I interrupted. "That's why Dad kept it hidden. That's why he's dead." Daniel laughed nervously. "Heart attack, right?" I didn't laugh back. He stepped toward me. "Listen, we can sell this. Just one drive, enough to disappear. Your mother never has to know." I thought of Mom, humming in the kitchen, believing she was finally safe again. And I thought of Dad, standing in the dark, handing me keys like a curse. "You don't understand. You weren't supposed to open that wall." A low hum filled the room. Daniel frowned. "What's that?" The lights flickered on, red, not white. Emergency power, backup systems, the kind that triggered when something valuable was disturbed. His phone rang. He answered without checking the number, his face drained of color. I just found it," he stammered. "I swear I didn't touch anything." He looked at me, terror replacing greed. "They know," he whispered. And for the first time since Dad died, I understood why he'd made me promise silence. Daniel begged me to help him escape, but the truth was cruel. I wasn't trapped in that warehouse with him. He was trapped there with my father's legacy and the people who were already on their way.
Daniel dropped the phone like it had burned him. "They asked my name," he said, voice cracking. "They already know who I am." I didn't ask who they were. Dad had taught me better than that. People like that didn't need introductions. The warehouse lights pulsed red again, slower this time, like a heartbeat. Somewhere above us, a door groaned shut. The place was sealing itself, Dad's final insurance policy. "You need to turn this off," Daniel shouted. "This place is locking down." "I don't know how," I lied. The truth was I did, but the override key was still in my pocket, and once I used it, there'd be no going back. Dad had made sure of that. Daniel grabbed my arm. "If they get here while I'm inside—" "They won't kill you right away," I said quietly. "They'll want to know what you saw, who you told, why you were worth noticing." He stared at me like he was finally seeing me for the first time. "You're not scared?" "I've been scared for years." His phone buzzed again, a message this time. "Stay where you are." Daniel laughed hysterically. "They're watching the building, aren't they?" "Yes." "How do you know?" "Because they always did." My phone rang next. "Mom." I answered without thinking. "Sweetheart, Daniel just texted me something strange. He said he found your father's real work. What does that mean?" Daniel lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. "Mom," I said, steadying my voice, "where are you right now?" "At home. Why?" "Lock the doors, don't answer anyone. If someone knocks, anyone, don't open." There was a pause. "You're scaring me." Daniel whispered, "Don't involve her." Too late. A knock echoed through the warehouse. Not loud, not urgent. 3 slow taps on metal. Daniel froze. "They're here already," he mouthed. I closed my eyes. Dad had warned me about the knock. He said real danger never rushed. It arrived patient and polite. Another knock, closer this time. A voice followed, calm and almost kind. "Mr. Daniel Hayes, we know you're inside." Daniel collapsed onto a crate. "Please," he whispered to me, "you can't let them take me." "You should have thought of that before marrying my mother," I replied. The voice continued, "Your wife is safe, for now." My blood ran cold. They knew. The power dynamic shifted in an instant. This wasn't about Daniel anymore. It was about leverage. "I'll open the door," I called out. "Daniel!" screamed No. I stepped toward the control panel. My hand hovered over the override. "Wait," Daniel said desperately. "There's something you don't know." I stopped. "Your father," he gasped, "he didn't just store secrets, he sold people out. Some of the names in those files, he caused their deaths." I turned slowly. "You're lying." "I'm not," he said. "Your father was worse than them." The knock came again. "This is your final warning. Open the warehouse." I thought of Dad's tired eyes, his insistence on silence, the way he'd hugged me that last night like he was apologizing for something he'd never explain. I flipped the switch. The doors began to open. As the locks disengaged, I realized Daniel wasn't the only in danger, because the men stepping inside the warehouse weren't here for him. They were here to finish what my father had started and settle the debt he left behind.
They didn't storm in. That was the worst part. 3 men walked through the warehouse doors like they owned the air inside it. No weapons visible, no raised voices, just tailored coats and eyes that never blinked long enough to feel human. The one in front smiled at me. "You must be his daughter." Daniel tried to crawl backward. "I didn't touch anything, I swear." The man didn't look at him. "We know." He turned back to me. "Your father had a system, rules. He cleaned problems for us, and in return, we left his family alone." My throat tightened. "Then why are you here?" "Because he broke his rules." Daniel stared at me. "I told you." The man nodded. "Your father kept copies, insurance. He believed fear was a safer currency than trust." I thought of the files, the names crossed out, the ones circled twice. "What do you want?" I asked. "Closure," he said, "and the rest of what he stole." He gestured toward the hidden room. "We'll take Mr. Hayes," he added, glancing at Daniel at last, "and the records." "No," I said before I could stop myself. The man raised an eyebrow. "No?" I said, "My mother. You said she was safe. If you take him, if anything happens, she'll know something's wrong." The man considered that. "You're more like your father than you realize." "I don't want to be." A silence stretched between us. Finally, he said, "Your father promised us his silence. In exchange, we promised him yours." I felt sick. He promised my silence without asking? He raised you. That was enough. Daniel started sobbing. "Please, I have a family." "So did he," the man replied flatly. They moved toward the shelves, loading folders into black cases with practiced efficiency. One of them stopped at a specific section, older files, deeper in the back. These weren't part of the agreement. My heart sank. Those were the ones Dad told me never to touch. The man looked at me sharply. "Did you know about these?" I shook my head. That much was true. He opened a folder and smiled without humor. "Your father didn't just betray us. He planned to replace us." The warehouse felt too small to breathe. "Your father was building leverage to become untouchable. New clients, new rules. He wanted out." I whispered, "So you killed him?" The man's smile faded. "No, we warned him." Daniel looked up in horror. "Then how did he die?" The man met my eyes. "He chose his family." Everything inside me cracked. "He triggered his own heart attack," I said numbly, remembering the pills, the strict schedule, the way he'd clutched his chest that final morning and smiled at me like he was relieved. "Yes," the man said, "and he left you the aftermath." They finished packing the files. "What happens now?" I asked. The man stepped closer. "Now you decide if the promise still stands." "Whose promise?" I asked. "Your father's. Silence in exchange for your mother's safety." Daniel screamed, "You can't just leave me." The man finally looked at him fully. "We can." They took Daniel. I didn't stop them. I went home to my mother that night and let her cry in my arms, telling her Daniel had run away, that he'd lied, that we were better off. Another lie, another betrayal. But as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I realized something worse. Dad hadn't protected me from his world. He'd prepared me to inherit it. I thought the nightmare was over when Daniel disappeared, but the next morning, a package arrived at my door, containing my father's ring, and a note that said, "You're up."
The package sat on my kitchen table like a threat pretending to be a gift. Inside was my father's ring, heavy, dull gold, engraved on the inside with symbols I'd never bothered to ask about. Beneath it, a single sheet of paper. "You're up." No signature, no explanation. I didn't tell my mother about it. She was already fragile, drifting through days like she was afraid to settle anywhere too long. Losing Daniel had reopened old wounds she pretended were scars. I slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit. That alone felt like betrayal. The next afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. "Your father's contacts are restless," a woman said calmly. "They don't like uncertainty." "Then they should have thought about that before killing him," I replied. A pause. "We didn't." I closed my eyes. "What do you want from me?" "To finish what he couldn't, or to burn it all down. Either way, you're the only one with access now." She named things only my father and I could have known: the emergency backups, the secondary warehouse, the dead man switches buried in places even I'd forgotten. "You were trained," she said. "You just didn't realize it." That night, I opened the secondary ledger Dad had hidden in the attic. Not records, instructions, timelines, contingencies. And at the back, one final entry. "If you're reading this, I failed to keep you clean. I'm sorry." I screamed into a pillow so my mother wouldn't hear. Over the next weeks, people started appearing in my life like pieces moving on a board I never agreed to play on. Bankers suddenly eager to help, lawyers who owed my father favors, men and women who spoke in half sentences and expected obedience. I played dumb, careful, quiet, just like Dad taught me. Then my mother sat me down one evening, hands trembling. "I need to tell you something," she said. My stomach sank. "Daniel wasn't the first man your father pushed away from me. He warned me people around him disappeared. I thought he was being dramatic." I swallowed hard. "He told me once that if anything happened to him, I should trust you, not the police, not the truth, just you." I stared at her. So she had known. Not everything, but enough. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. She looked away. "Because I wanted a normal life, and I thought marrying Daniel would protect us." I laughed bitterly. "From Dad or from yourself?" She flinched. That night, I got another message, this time not from my father's world. It was a video. Daniel, bruised, exhausted, alive. He said if I talk, your mother dies. The screen went black. I understood then. This wasn't inheritance, it was blackmail. They didn't need me to replace my father. They needed me to become him. I had one chance to save my mother and destroy everything my father built, but the choice I made next would decide whether Daniel lived or whether I finally stopped lying to myself.
I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, my father's ring cutting into my finger. Daniel's terrified face burned into my mind. Every lie I'd ever told my mother lined up in my chest like unpaid debts. By morning, I knew what they expected. They wanted me to choose efficiency over mercy, silence over truth, control over love. Exactly the choice my father had made. The call came at noon. "You've seen the video," the woman said. "Good, then you understand the stakes." "Where is he?" I asked. "Safe, for now. That depends on you." She slid an address across the line. A private office building near the docks. Neutral ground, she called it. I called it a test. Before I left, I stood in my mother's doorway. She was folding laundry, moving slowly, like grief had aged her years overnight. "Mom," I said softly, "if I tell you something, will you trust me?" She didn't hesitate. "I always have." The words nearly stopped me. "I need you to leave town, today. Don't ask why." She studied my face, then nodded. "Your father used to look like that." That hurt more than any accusation. When I arrived at the docks, 2 guards escorted me inside. The woman from the phone call waited behind a glass desk, calm as ever. "You're late," she said. "I came alone," I replied. "That should count for something." She smiled faintly. "It does." Daniel was brought in moments later. His hands were free, but his eyes were hollow. "I didn't tell them anything," he said quickly. "I swear." "I know," I said. The woman clasped her hands. "Here's how this ends. You give us the final backup, everything your father hid, and Mr. Hayes walks away. New identity, clean slate." "And my mother?" I asked. "Untouched," she promised. I reached into my bag and placed a flash drive on the desk. Daniel exhaled in relief. The woman picked it up, but didn't smile. "This is incomplete," she said. I met her gaze. "No, this is everything that matters." Silence stretched. "You're lying," she said finally. "I learned from the best." Her eyes hardened. "Then you leave us no choice." She nodded once. The lights went out. Chaos erupted, shouting, movement, the crack of something hitting the floor. In the darkness, a hand grabbed mine. "Run," Daniel whispered. We burst through a side door into the open air. Alarms screamed behind us. I didn't look back. We separated at the corner like strangers. I went home. By the time I arrived, the house was empty. My mother was gone. No note, no message. Just my father's ring placed carefully on the table. I sank to the floor, shaking. They hadn't wanted the files. They'd wanted proof I couldn't protect her. And they'd gotten it. I thought losing my mother was the worst thing they could do, but the final truth waiting for me would reveal that the warehouse secret wasn't about power. It was about punishment.
I found my mother at the warehouse. Not inside, not hidden, but waiting. She stood near the rusted gate, coat pulled tight around her shoulders, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. No guards, no men in suits, just her, and the truth I'd spent years avoiding. "You didn't take her," I said aloud, even though no one was there to answer. "She came on her own," a voice said behind me. The woman stepped out of the shadows, calm, precise, tired. "She wanted answers," she continued, "just like you did once." I ran to my mother, grouping her hands. "Why would you come here?" She smiled sadly. "Because I finally stopped pretending your father was just a good man with bad secrets." The woman watched us quietly. "Your father built the warehouse as a ledger, not of crimes, but of consequences." I turned to her. "What does that mean?" "It means," she replied, "everyone whose name was stored there had hurt someone who couldn't fight back. Politicians, executives, enforcers. Your father didn't protect them, he documented them." My chest tightened. "He waited," my mother whispered, "for the day the truth would matter more than fear." The woman nodded. "Your father was never loyal to us. He was patient." I remembered the crossed-out names, the circled ones, the ones left untouched. "He was collecting evidence," I said, "for justice." "For judgment," she corrected. "The warehouse wasn't leverage, it was a confession booth." I laughed bitterly. "Then why destroy lives? Why Daniel?" "Because your father made one unforgivable mistake," she said calmly. "He loved his family." Silence fell between us. "They killed him because he planned to release everything," my mother said softly, "and when he couldn't, he left it to you." The woman looked at me. "You were never meant to replace him, you were meant to finish him." I understood then. The ring wasn't a symbol of power, it was a key. I reached into my bag and pulled out the final drive, the one I'd never shown anyone, the one hidden inside the ring itself. I already sent it, I said quietly, to every journalist he listed, every watchdog group, every rival who hated you. The woman's composure finally cracked. You destroyed everything, she said. No, my mother replied firmly. He told the truth. Sirens echoed in the distance, many of them. The woman stepped back into the shadows. Your father always said the hardest punishment was exposure. She disappeared. I held my mother as the first police cars arrived. This time, I didn't lie, I didn't protect, I didn't stay silent. Weeks later, the warehouse was seized. Names fell, empires collapsed, trials began. Daniel vanished, for real this time. My mother and I moved away, somewhere quiet, where doors stayed unlocked and secrets didn't echo. Sometimes I still dream of the warehouse, not as a place of fear, but as a warning. Because now I know the truth I never told my mother. The warehouse was never meant to hide evil. It was built to make sure evil couldn't hide forever. And if you're wondering why I'm finally telling this story now, it's because my father always said the truth only stays buried until the right voice decides to speak.